Okay, Rockfin, any day now. Oh boy. And Rumble's all set. All right, let's go. Doobie-doobie-doo.
Sabrinasalvati. Doobie-doobie-doo. 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 I'm your host, Sabrinasalvati. Doobie-doobie-doo.
All right. Happy Friday, guys. Welcome to Sabby Sabs Podcast. I'm your host, Sabrinasalvati. If you're new, I want to let you know that Sabby Sabs Podcast is a part of Revolutionary Blackout Network. You can catch me there on Thursdays for the Sabby and JB show, and you can catch me here on Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and every other Sunday. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a huge story tonight. If you have not heard by now, that's probably going to take up most of my time tonight because I do want to make sure that I discuss the ICJ ruling. I really want to break it down, and I want to talk about it in reference to the pros and the cons of this ruling. I think it's really important for people to understand what this ruling really means and what could come next, etc. But huge story tonight. Shout out to everyone watching on YouTube, Rockfin, Twitter, and Rumble. We're about to do the damn thing. Let's go ahead and shout out people in the chat. What's going on, David? Says Sabby, as I said, there was an article on this, but I can't find it, of Delta share code with the Israeli airline. So that is ants. I don't know what the ant is, but welcome, David. What's going on? Shout out to Jonathan Williams, who just became a Sabby member. Let's give Jonathan a big whoop, whoop. Greetings, Dai, Nita Dai. Hi, Sabby Sabs from Nepal. And Nita means politician in my language. Oh, love the way your humanity shows when you talk about stuff. Thank you so much and welcome. Shout out to Lawrence, who's a Sabby member, says Shaka when the walls fell. Greetings, Gup says BDS. And there's a link there, but I can't click on the link in StreamYard. What's going on? New York Varsity Sports says shooby-dooby-doo. I'm on time to listen with the crew. What's going on? Hannah says working and listening. Shout out to Cup of Joy, who's a Sabby member, says snap a joy here. Greetings, Lorez says bonjour, Sab, Eric and Sabby fam. LOL, DEI fight, huh? Will be funny, I'm sure. Piers gets cred for having on dissident voices, but he's still establishment. ICJ ruling wasn't good, better than nothing. We're going to get into that tonight. Shout out to Red Six says hello, Sabby, happy Friday. My hair is, what's happening here? What is happening with the hair? Anyway, shout out to Rick says, hey, y'all. Greetings, Eric. T-Red, who's a Sabby member, says Friday peeps, here we go. Greetings, Dabby Dab sends a smile. Shout out to ACAB, who's a Sabby member, says, hi, everyone. Greetings, Aspen Fallen. I think that is a alligator and pizza and a volcano. What's going on? Shout out to Pineapple Justice, jumping from Katie's interview with Norm and Craig. Shout out to Volvo, says, hey, Cookie. Greetings, Juan, says, que paso, Rick. Shout out to James, who's a Sabby member, says, here on time tonight. Yay. I'm at work, but I always have time for some Sabby. For those of you who listen to YouTube shows at work, I wonder, what do you do for work? I'm just curious. Maybe you have a job where you can put in, earbuds or something. Always curious about that. What's up, Mastermind Hour, who's a Sabby member, says Israel is spelled A before E, except after river to the sea. Shout out to Brother Daniel, says happy Friday, fam. Greetings, JoJo, says finally catching the show live. Welcome. I don't know what's going on with my hair today. It's like part of this is like, I don't know what happened. Anywho, that's going to bug me. Shout out to Randy, who's a Sabby member, says, good evening, Sabby comrades. Greetings, Ravina, who's a Sabby member, says, the only person that would make me click away from Bose is Sabby. Evening, comrades. Shout out to Leroy, who's a Sabby member, says, good day, comrades. And shout out to DT Pointer, says, doobie doobie doo. All right, we got a big show tonight, guys. Let's go ahead and get started. I want to give a shout out to Sabby patrons. Thank you guys so much for holding down the fort around here. You're doing the damn thing. If you're interested in being a Sabby patron, I have 5 categories: ultimate, Sabinators, Sabsters, Sabbies, and of course, members. All of their names are listed here. You can also see their names scrolling across the bottom of the screen there on the ticker. And I want to give a special shout out to new Sabby patrons. Over here, we call them newbies. Let's give it up for We Win and Kai Karan. Welcome and thank you so much. We are going to get into it tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Let's go ahead and share that beautiful thumbnail. I've been waiting all day to talk about this. You guys have no idea. I've been waiting all day. Tonight, we are discussing Piers Morgan versus MIKO PELED. You'll see there the picture. It says, oh, snap, because you'll see what Piers Morgan tried to do during this debate here, which I thought was very obvious. And they have a debate about the Houthis who are trying to prevent those ships from giving those arms to Israel. But wait till you see what Piers Morgan tries to do during this debate. We're also going to discuss Joe Rogan is in denial. This video has been going viral on Twitter. It appears to me that Joe Rogan doesn't seem to remember some of the conversations that he's had with guests on his show. So we're going to talk about that. We're also going to discuss BRIE and ROBBIE DEI debate. This was actually really good. There's a couple of things that I'm going to point out, especially when they get to the issue about higher education and admissions, because that was my field. And we're also going to discuss, if you haven't heard, the ICJ ruling, which did come down today. I'm going to talk about the pros and the cons of that ruling, why we should be still somewhat concerned. And we're also going to cover the Colorado ballot measure result for 2023. So without further ado, let's get into it. We're going to start with the ICJ story, just because that's probably where I'm going to spend most of my time. I have a lot to say, and there's a lot to discuss. So if you are not aware, the ICJ did deliver a preliminary ruling today in reference to the case that South Africa has brought against Israel. And I want to be very clear here because I don't want people to misinterpret what was ruled today. The case that South Africa brought to the courts is that Israel is committing genocide. One thing you have to remember, and I talked about this a couple nights ago, that actual factor, it could take years for the court to rule on that. The decision that was made today is a preliminary ruling. So we're going to go ahead and get started right with the ruling from the court. We're going to jump in here. This is a clip here from Democracy Now! And then I'm going to tell you some of the things about this ruling that I feel does not go far enough. Don't get me wrong. This isn't good for Israel. It's not good at all. It's a reputation killer. I'm just going to be honest. But does it go far enough? Let's go ahead and get into the ruling here. And I'm also going to explain to you The judge, her name is Judge Joan. I'm going to explain to you where this woman actually came from. I think you'd be interested in hearing that. Let's get into it.
And ordered provisional measures, but stopped short of calling for an immediate ceasefire. The ruling was read out by the president of the court, Joan Donoghue. She began with the finding that South Africa had jurisdiction to bring the case against Israel.
In the court's view, at least some of the acts and omissions alleged by South Africa to have been committed by Israel in Gaza appear to be capable of falling within the provisions of the convention. In light of the following, the court concludes that, prima facie, it has jurisdiction pursuant to Article 9 of the convention to entertain the case.
South Africa had asked the court, as a matter of extreme urgency, to impose emergency measures to protect Palestinians in Gaza. The president of the court went on to read out the findings regarding South Africa's request for provisional measures.
In the court's view, the aforementioned facts and circumstances are sufficient to conclude that at least some of the rights claimed by South Africa and for which it is seeking protection are plausible. This is the case with respect to the right of Palestinians in Gaza to be protected from acts of genocide and related prohibited acts identified in Article 3.
So let's pause here. So what she is saying is that some of the claims from South Africa in reference to the genocide and the treatment of the Palestinians in Gaza, that also includes the humanitarian aid, are plausible. So again, I say this is a reputation killer for Israel. I told you guys before when they said they were going to court that South Africa actually had a very strong case. They did their homework. You know, they looked for the right type of evidence. They showed video footage of some of the things that Israel has been doing to the Palestinian people, some of the phrases that they've been saying, whether it was the IDF or whether it was Israeli officials. So they made sure they did their homework.
Right of South Africa to seek Israel's compliance with the latter's obligations under the convention. The court then turns to the condition of the link between the plausible rights claimed by South Africa and the provisional measures requested. It considers that by their very nature, at least some of the provisional measures sought by South Africa are aimed at preserving the plausible rights it asserts on the basis of the Genocide Convention in the present case, namely, the right of the Palestinians in Gaza to be protected from acts of genocide and related prohibited acts mentioned in Article 3, and the right of South Africa to seek Israel's compliance with the latter's obligations under the convention. Therefore, a link exists between the rights claimed by South Africa that the court has found to be plausible and at least some of the provisional measures requested.
You hear that? So she said a link does exist between the two.
President of the court, Joan Donoghue, cited the killing of Palestinians in Gaza, mass displacement, deprivation of aid, and other charges brought by South Africa, and went on to say the court found a plausible risk that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza.
The court considers that there is urgency in the sense that there is a real and imminent risk that irreparable prejudice will be caused to the rights found by the court to be plausible before it gives its final decision.
So here she is admitting that Israel has prejudice against the Palestinian people. That's damning. Let's go on a little bit more.
The court concludes on the basis of the aforementioned considerations that the conditions required by its statute for it to indicate provisional measures are met. It is therefore necessary, pending its final decision, for the court to indicate certain measures in order to protect the rights claimed by South Africa that the court has found to be plausible.
For more, we're joined by three guests.
Okay. I wanted to show you that part there. The court does find at least some of the evidence from South Africa to be plausible. Now, I want you to know who that woman is. We're going to bring her picture back up for just a second. This is Judge Joan Donoghue. But do you know where she came from? I'll show you. Because see, I think most of you probably have never even heard of this woman until today. She came from the U.S. State Department. Look at this. The president of the ICJ is Judge Joan Donoghue, former top legal advisor under Hillary Clinton at the State Department during the Obama administration. And they go on to say she will imminently read the court's ruling on South Africa's request for emergency provisional measures in Israel genocide case. So that's where she came from, the U.S. State Department. Interesting where people end up, right? Keep that in mind for further rulings. Just keep that in mind. They went on to say, this is Jeremy Scahill, the court could rule entirely in South Africa's favor and order all of the measures requested, including directing a halt to Israel's attacks and siege against Gaza. It could dismiss it entirely, or it could rule in favor of only some requests or create its tailored orders. So what happened in the court? Part of the problem, let's talk about some of the cons. Part of the problem with that ruling is that they did not actually call for a ceasefire. That's part of the problem, but more people are calling that out now. But when this decision was first announced, I noticed a lot of people on social media were just kind of like, yay, this is a huge victory. And I was like, no, this is not a huge victory. Don't get me wrong. This is a first step. This is a good step in the right direction, but we still have a ways to go. I really wish they would have called for a ceasefire, because essentially Israel can continue to bomb Gaza. Now, the problem with this ruling is that the ICJ actually does not have the power to enforce any of this. So a ruling without enforcement, some people are going to refer to it as a slap on the wrist. Now, again, don't get me wrong. It damages Israel's reputation. And don't get it twisted either. South Africa is very well aware of how the ICJ operates. My comrade JB and I from RBN, we talked about this earlier today. South Africa knows the ICJ ain't about shit. South Africa knows that. But what South Africa wanted to do was show the entire world what Israel has been doing to the Palestinian people. So they know the ICJ can't enforce any of these things, but they wanted to show the world who Israel is. Now, there's more steps to take place, but obviously Netanyahu had to issue a response. Let's hear what he had to say.
Israel's commitment to international law is unwavering. Equally unwavering is our sacred commitment to continue to defend our country and defend our people.
First 10 seconds, Netanyahu was already lying. So Israel has been proven multiple times they are not following international law. They have also been committing war crimes. First 10 seconds, already lying.
Like every country, Israel has an inherent right to defend itself. The vile attempt to deny Israel this fundamental right is blatant discrimination against the Jewish state.
Now he's going to claim that the ruling from the ICJ is basically anti-Semitism. They're being discriminated against. It's the same playbook, you guys. They use the same playbook over and over again. The Zionist playbook. You let me do what I want to do. Don't you dare try to hold me accountable. And if you do, I'm going to say that you're discriminating against me. Let's continue.
And it was justly rejected. The charge of genocide leveled against Israel is not only false, it's outrageous, and decent people everywhere should reject it. On the eve of the International Holocaust Remembrance Day, I again pledge as Israel's Prime Minister, never again. Israel will continue to defend itself against Hamas, a genocidal terror organization.
So now the claim is that Hamas is the genocider here. Hamas is not in power. The state of Israel is. There were estimated 1,200 Israelis that were killed on October 7th. As it stands right now, Israel has killed over 25,000 Palestinian people. And that's just the number today. We don't know what the number will be next week. But Hamas is the genocider in this situation, according to Netanyahu.
On October 7th, Hamas perpetrated the most horrific atrocities against the Jewish people since the Holocaust, and it vows to repeat these atrocities again and again and again. Our war is against Hamas terrorists, not against Palestinian civilians. We will continue to facilitate humanitarian assistance and to do our utmost to keep civilians out of harm's way, even as Hamas uses civilians as human shields. We will continue to do what is necessary to defend our country and defend our people.
So first of all, I showed you the video last night of Israelis blocking humanitarian efforts from entering into Gaza. So he's lying about that in reference to humanitarian efforts. This is Netanyahu basically trying to defend himself. And I can tell you right now, there are already calls in Israel asking for Netanyahu to resign because this is an image killer, the ruling from the ICJ. Now, I told you I want to talk about the pros and the cons. The pro is the fact that this is a reputation killer for Israel. It's a right step in the direction that we need to go. The other pro is also the fact that the ICJ is acknowledging that South Africa did bring damning evidence against Israel, and they are calling for demands in reference to Israel. I'm going to show you those demands in just a second. And it shows the world what Israel has been doing to the Palestinian people. So there are pros to go along with this. But when we talk about some of the cons, again, they didn't demand an actual ceasefire. So that means, again, that Israel can continue to bomb Gaza. And they'll just do what Netanyahu did, use the defense that they are defending theirself. So as long as they can continue to say that, this is problematic. Now, what should happen going forward? Since they did not call for the ceasefire, we would need the UN Security Council to do so. And then that would put the pressure on the US government. You see, if the ICJ had called for the permanent ceasefire, that would have put more pressure on Joe Biden and his administration to also call for the ceasefire. But let me show you what they actually demanded, and then we'll get to the video next. Okay, do it this way. Sorry. Yeah, I'm gonna click on this one. ICJ refused to order a ceasefire or suspension of Israeli attacks. The ICJ only ordered the following. Israel shall take all measures within its power to prevent genocidal acts against Palestinians. Okay, so isn't that the same thing that the Biden administration told Netanyahu a couple of months ago? He told Netanyahu to do everything that it can to protect the civilian life. Okay, so that's not really a new thing. They are using the word genocidal, though. So that's one thing. This piece here, Israel will ensure that its army doesn't commit any genocidal acts. Israel will prevent and punish public incitement to commit genocide against the Palestinians. That's in reference to some of the phrases that have come from Israeli officials where they've called for the end of all Palestinians. Israel will ensure the provision of urgent services and humanitarian aid to Gaza. Israel will ensure the preservation of evidence related to allegations of genocide, meaning they shouldn't purge any evidence. Israel will submit a report to the court in 1 month showing its compliance with these orders. So this basically comes across like a list of recommendations. These are all the things that the ICJ is demanding Israel to do. But as I told you earlier, they can't enforce it. That's the big problem. So it's basically, Israel, these are the things you need to do, and we demand that you bring us a report within 1 month. And if they don't, how do Palestinians feel about the ruling? Because I noticed one of the things that I chose to do today, while a lot of people were jumping up and cheering, I chose to look at the Palestinian accounts that I follow to see how they felt about this ruling. They're not happy with this ruling. They are not happy with it. So, in fact, one of them that isn't happy with it is Motaz. So we know Motaz, I've shown him on here before. He's one of the journalists that has been reporting in Gaza. He said, F the ICJ and the whole world governments. Listen to what he had to say. I told you, they're not happy.
So it was a lie, a big lie. Thank for South Africa for all the efforts. But it looks like the ICJ, it's pro-Israelis. So fuck them and fuck the whole governments around the world. Only the people who are standing with the with the Palestinian, even with the humanity. So, but we literally lost our trust in every decision maker in the whole world. So yeah, again, fuck the ICJ. So it was a lie, a big lie. Thank for South Africa for all the efforts. But it looks like the ICJ, it's pro-Israelis. So fuck them and fuck the whole governments around the world. Only the people who are standing with the with the Palestinian, even with the humanity. So, but we literally lost our trust in every decision maker in the whole world.
If you follow other Palestinian accounts on Twitter, you'll see similar responses. I don't want to, break your spirits here or anything, guys, but I do want to keep it real with you, right? So again, we're talking about the pros and the cons. Richie Medhurst had a really good take on this. Richie said, it is my job to translate politician to English. So let me explain what the ICJ just ruled. Israel can keep slaughtering Palestinians. Take your time and stop announcing the genocide when you speak Hebrew. Also, give Palestinians some food before you shoot them. Back in a few years. That's essentially what this is. Like I said, it's a good first step, but this is not the end all be all. More needs to happen. And this is why I was so frustrated about this today, that they did not call for the ceasefire. If they would have called for the ceasefire, that puts pressure on other world leaders to do the same damn thing. Israel can still bomb Gaza. They can still kill Palestinian people. You think Netanyahu is just going to follow those demands that they gave? They have no enforcement. Now, bring up the rest of Richie's here. This does not negate in any way what South Africa did. They are champions. They came in that court with receipts of the biggest crime today and put it on the record. It is not their fault. The post-World War II legal framework is rigged by Israel, the US, and the UK. And remember, the UK tends to follow the lead of the United States. Now, I want you to hear this. I saw this on MSNBC earlier. Listen to how they refer to this, that it's not as serious as people think. Again, like I said, to Israel's reputation, it is damning. They did put this on the world stage. So again, shout out to South Africa. Nobody else was willing to do it. Right? But listen how they refer to this.
And joining us now is Ambassador Alon Pinkas, former Israeli Consul General in New York. Ambassador, always a pleasure to see you. I thank you for your time. What was your first reaction to this International Court of Justice's decision, partial decision today?
Well, okay, Jose, it's like this, it's like a yellow card in soccer and football. It was a stern warning. And, there are two ways of looking at it, or two takeaways. The first is the court said that, the court refrained from asking Israel to cease fire and to immediately halt any military operations. Had it chose to do so, it would have vindicated the argument that there could be a genocide, or that conditions for a genocide, for some form of genocide, exist. The court did.
You hear that part? Remember, they didn't ask Israel. I read the demands to you. They didn't ask Israel to halt any military operations. He's letting you know right now. If they would have done that, this would be huge. It would be bigger than huge. I would have been like, yeah, man, jumping up for joy. But they didn't ask them to do that. Again, you have to remember who this woman is. I told you she came from the U.S. State Department.
Not do that. On the other hand, as Matt Bradley, your correspondent, accurately put it, the court did issue provisional orders for Israel, all of which amount to a suspicion that those conditions for genocide could be met. Now, this is not genocide from a legal point of view, because you need to prove intent. And intent is a very difficult thing to prove, and I'm pretty satisfied that there's absolutely no intent on Israel's side. However,
so he's lying there. There is definitely intent on Israel's side. We've seen video footage of them making the comments that they want the Palestinian people gone. Netanyahu had the speech in front of the UN where he proposed the greater Israel idea, where Gaza was also removed from the map. The West Bank was not there. Obviously, he wants to expand Israel in reference to the greater Israel plan. So him saying that I'm sure there's no intent from Israel, that's a blatant lie. That's a blatant lie. Now, what he is correct about, proving intent in court is difficult. Very, very difficult. And I'll give you an example. There was a case, a claim that was filed at the EEOO, the Equal Opportunity Office at BU. And what they will tell you is that most of the claims that come to them are dismissed. You want to know why? Because they have to prove that there was intent. And if they can't prove that there was intent, then they have to throw the claim out. So intent is difficult to prove in the court of law. However, in this particular situation, there is a multitude of video evidence to prove Israel's intent. So he's telling some truth, but he's not telling the whole truth.
If you look at the humanitarian aid and the medical aid that is stipulated in the ruling, you see that even though it's not mentioned specifically, Jose, the court is essentially saying there should be a ceasefire. Now, tie this now to the possibility of a hostage deal that is being discussed, deliberated, or negotiated, mediated by Qatar and indirectly by the U.S. And that also includes an extended ceasefire. So take those two together, we're looking at the possibility of a ceasefire. In and of itself, the decision was less than what Israel feared, but it's a major, major slap on the wrist.
Yeah, and
you hear what he's referring to it as? A slap on the wrist. So Israel got somewhat of a break here. Don't get me wrong. They didn't walk away with their hands clean. But they got somewhat of a break because, like I said, the court did not call for a ceasefire or a halt of military operations. When we talk about a sense of urgency, if the court felt strongly that Israel was committing genocide, then wouldn't they demand that you stop any type of military activity in Gaza? Because that screams a sense of urgency. Wouldn't they make that demand? So this is what I'm trying to tell you guys. Basically, the ICJ, they tried to both sides the situation. There's no both sides when Israel is the oppressor and the occupier, the occupier, and they are the ones that are in power. So how do you both sides this situation? This is not just about the war in Gaza. This is also about the illegal settlements that are happening in the West Bank, which the UN has ruled multiple times that these settlements are illegal. The Palestinian people have been displaced. They're still displacing Palestinian people. So Israel is in power and occupying the Palestinian people. The ICJ knows this. That judge that sat up there and read that ruling is very well aware. All those people sitting in that court, they are very well aware what Israel has been doing to the Palestinian people. Do not let them fool you. This is not the first time they've heard these claims. Not the first time. But don't get it twisted. They are still going to try their best to protect somewhat, some part of Israel's reputation. Going a little bit more here.
Ambassador, you signed a letter along with 40 other former Israeli officials who are now calling on Prime Minister Netanyahu to resign. What do you think needs to happen? What needs to change?
But look, to be honest, Jose, he should have resigned on October 7th, and then on November 7th, and then December 7th, and then January 7th. And he's probably going to get to February 7th without resigning. So this letter is more an expression of will and wishful thinking rather than a prescription or a plan of action. He needs to resign. Now, if he doesn't resign, resignation is nothing that I expect him to do. What he needs to do, what the political system needs to do, is to call for an election. Obviously, there is a heightened level of frustration with him in the U.S. and the Biden administration. Obviously, he has not cooperated on American visions of post-war Gaza. And obviously, he's not a partner in American eyes to a what's called a reconfigured Middle East. So the pressure, the domestic pressure and the international pressure, particularly that coming from the U.S., will, I think, in the next 2-3 months, force him into calling for an early election. Now, there's one more thing, if I may add, Jose.
Yes.
His coalition is going to be extraordinarily resistant and opposed to the combination of the ICJ, the International Court of Justice's ruling, and the hostage deal on grounds that a ceasefire fails to address Israel's war objectives, toppling, eliminating, eradicating, annihilating Hamas. And so I could see his coalition. I mean, there's a possibility of his coalition imploding within those 2-3 months period.
Okay, so here's the problem, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, we all know Netanyahu is a problem. But this didn't start with Netanyahu's administration. The displacement of the Palestinian people started in 1948 with the Nakba, right? So this has been going on all along. Now, what should he call out? He should call out Zionism, but he's not going to do that. And if he did, he wouldn't be on MSNBC in the first damn place. That's the problem, because you see, Netanyahu can resign. They'll just replace him with some other puppet. As long as you still have this Zionist state in power, the next leader can continue to carry on the same crimes against the Palestinian people. The Oracle says the ICJ tried to punt on this issue, and this decision erodes the integrity of the court and the efficacy of international law. And I'll say it this way. If we want to talk about a sports analogy here, The ICJ, they honestly could have, if the ICJ was the quarterback, instead of throwing the ball down the field 30 plus yards and landing a touchdown, they decided to hand the ball to a running back only to get tackled 5 yards down. That's what they did. They could have thrown for a freaking touchdown, but they decided to hand the ball off. That's what the ICJ did. Now, here's this question. Can Israel ignore the world's court order? We want to talk about this idea of intent here, because that gentleman told you, well, they can't prove intent in reference to Israel and Gaza. And I told you there's multiple videos that do prove that. This gentleman here, his name is Raz Segal. He is actually going to explain this, how they do actually have the case to prove that Israel had intent. Listen to him.
It's a context. I think it's very important to say that the court basically accepted South Africa's argument that Israel's quote-unquote evacuation orders are not actually, as Israel claimed, humanitarian measures, but they're actually genocidal in essence. That means that they are meant, which is what they did, to displace millions of people, almost 2 million Palestinians, well, virtually almost all the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, and under intensive bombings. And we know that Israel also bombed Palestinians fleeing on routes that it designated as safe. It also bombed Palestinians in the southern part of the Strip early on, which it designated as safe. And of course, under the conditions of the total siege, where we today, indeed, this measure did what it was intended to do, right? It created famine, it created the spread of infectious disease, it created a population that has no access to clean water, has no fuel, has no medical supply. It destroyed all the universities in Gaza. It destroyed a majority of the hospitals. It destroyed agricultural land. It targeted cultural sites. So everything that we know historically that happens in genocide, and with this massive displacement that is now, we know that even if Israel's attack stops now, many Palestinians will continue to die of these conditions of life, again, if to quote the convention, that Israel deliberately created in order to bring about the physical destruction of the group in whole or in part. So I thought...
Look at Gaza. Look at it. You can't live in this. It's destroyed. Look at that. So one of the strongest cases to prove intent was one of the examples that he gave about the evacuation process and instructions. When Israel told the Palestinian civilians to leave North Gaza and to go to the southern part of Gaza, and then they still proceeded to bomb the southern part of Gaza. When they told the Palestinian people that there were certain areas that were declared as safe zones, and they still continued to kill. We saw the video last night, to kill Palestinians in the safe zones. When they blocked off exits after they told the Palestinian civilians to go to those exits, and then they bombed those exits and made it so that they could not leave, that is a hell lot of intent. That's one of the best examples that you can use to prove that there was intent. And then there's the video footage of Israeli officials blatantly saying on TV shows that they want the Palestinian people gone. But that example that he gave you, they destroyed all the hospitals, all of them. So if you didn't die by a bomb, but you're injured, you can die because of the injuries, because there's no hospitals. They don't have anesthesia. They're trying to do surgeries on people without anesthesia. There's that. You're caged in Gaza. Where are you supposed to go? They bombed the schools. They killed the kids. They've been killing the kids. And what Israel has done to the Palestinian people, guys, this can happen to any other group in the world. Any other group in the world. Let's go on for a little bit more. Again, his name is Raz Segal.
It was very important that the ruling actually quoted and emphasized both the issues of intent and the dynamics of violence and the conditions that we see now on the ground. This is very, very significant. Again, the court is saying that there is plausibility that Israel is likely, has committed and is committing acts of genocide in Gaza.
So remember the plausibility. Remember what Judge Jones said, that it is plausible based on the evidence presented by South Africa. Would have been better if the court would have said it is without a doubt that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza, right? Would have been better. Would have been better if they would have called for the permanent ceasefire, right? If they would have said halt the military actions, but they didn't. And because they didn't do that, you got clowns out here like John Kirby using this as defense that the U.S. government doesn't really have anything to worry about here in reference to sending those weapons to Israel. Because the court did not make it blatantly so, John Kirby is able to make comments like this when he's questioned about it, about the ruling.
Kirby, I wanted to ask you about the lower court decision ordering Israel to prevent acts of genocide, but it stopped short of ordering a ceasefire. You have suggested multiple times that South Africa's claim does not really have merit. And I'm wondering, how does the U.S. repair relations with South Africa, which is a big voice for non-aligned countries in the global South?
I don't believe that our disagreement over the founding claim of the allegation causes any permanent damage to the bilateral relationship with South Africa. We just happen to disagree on that point. But we're also going to keep working on that relationship as we do many others.
So you fundamentally believe the U.S., they claim that the U.S. is supporting a genocidal state. That is not going to impact relations with South Africa.
I don't believe I heard that from South Africa.
Yes, South Africa did say that. So here's John Kirby lying. South Africa definitely did say that the United States government is supporting a genocidal state. And South Africa also said they want to hold the United States government accountable too, and the UK. So John Kirby is full of it. He's lying. And that reporter knows it.
Africa filed a case based on allegations that they believe genocide was being conducted by Israel in Gaza. I don't believe it was directed at us at all. We simply have said consistently. That's
a damn lie. That is a damn lie. When did I cover that? I'm trying to remember, Eric. I think I covered that. I want to say last year. Maybe that was December or late November when I covered that. It might have been late November when South Africa released that statement that they also blamed the United States. Crazy, right? Such a mess.
In Gaza, I don't believe it was directed at us at all. We simply have said consistently we find that claim is unfounded. And you know the court also did not find Israel guilty of genocide.
You hear that last part? He said the court did not find Israel guilty of genocide. So I told you there are different parts to this case. What they ruled today was a preliminary hearing, right? So the genocide part, that can take years. I told you guys that a couple of days ago. That can take years for that ruling. So because the court did not come out and say it in that way, he's able to sit there and say, well, they didn't find them guilty of genocide. But the court said that based on the evidence presented by South Africa, they said that it is plausible This is not good for the United States. I'm going to let you guys know right now, this is not good for us. And you'll see why in just a second, because honestly, it's not just about what happened at the ICJ. You need to know about what's happening in Oakland, California, because this is all coming to a head. And people can sit up there and John Kirby can lie. Anthony Blinken can lie. Joe Biden can lie. But the world sees that the U.S. government supplied Israel with those damn weapons and that the U.S. government has constantly been defending Israel, right? It was December. Thank you, JK. It was December. Okay. I couldn't remember when I said it, but thank you. Now, in Oakland, California, Palestinians are taking the Biden administration to court this week. I told you, Joe Biden needed to get as far away from Netanyahu as possible. Palestinians are taking the Biden administration to court this week. This week, a federal court in Oakland will be hearing arguments in a lawsuit accusing the Biden administration of failing to prevent a genocide in Gaza. The case could bring U.S. support for the Israeli assault on Gaza to a halt. And I like the fact that they use the word assault. Eric and I were talking about this earlier today. Maybe we need to start changing our vocabulary instead of saying the word war, because, neocons just eat that word up, right? Say assault. Israel's assault on Gaza. It's much stronger. But it goes on to say, the claim was filed against President Joe Biden, Secretary Anthony Blinken, and Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin by the Center for Constitutional Rights in November. The legal effort was taken on behalf of 2 Palestinian organizations and 8 Palestinians living in the United States. The effort is backed by almost 80 human rights organizations across the globe. We need to pay attention to this case here, right? So in San Francisco, check this out. If I was Joe Biden, I would be embarrassed. Pro-Palestinian messages painted outside the Ronald V. Dellums Federal Building, U.S. Courthouse in Oakland. Inside, a judge was hearing a case brought by Palestinian rights groups accusing President Biden and top officials of aiding genocide in Gaza. So hopefully I'll be able to have more information about that and cover that on Tuesday. But look at this, guys. This is in San Francisco. Biden complicit in genocide, right there for the whole city to see. See that? It goes on to say, no bombs to Israel. He should be embarrassed, right? Don't you think that Joe Biden should be embarrassed? I would be embarrassed. What's that, Ninja? Today they asked for the injunction. Okay. I should be able to cover it more on Tuesday then. Like, I don't think I've ever seen this level of pushback. I know there was pushback in reference to the Iraq war, but this feels like a whole different level. And the Biden administration isn't listening. Why aren't they listening? Because they're in Israel's pocket. When you have an organization like AIPAC that owns most of the politicians in DC, this is the kind of thing that happens. You won't hold this country accountable. You're giving this country $3.8 billion a year, but they don't want to give you health care. They don't want to give you a home. They don't want to give you free public education at the universities in this country. Meanwhile, Israel has free college. Everyone in Israel has health care. This is why demands are very important. And we need to stress this. And when people come to you and they push back and say, we have the right to exist and and all that stuff, you push back and you tell them the Palestinians have a right to exist. You push back and you tell them, why the hell your country getting all this money from my country? And they don't want to help people in this country. This should be the big pushback. It's great that we have all the protests that are happening and they're still going on. That's great. It makes me happy. I've been to the protests. We need to keep that up. But in the list of demands, and I told you a ceasefire is the bare minimum that we're asking for, there should also be in that list of demands, the Palestinian people need self-determination in the occupation, which I think that is one of the demands as well of the Palestinian people. And also stop giving our damn money to another country. Blatantly as that. Stop giving them $3.8 billion a year and you don't want to take care of your own damn people in this country. That should be the demand. Always bring it back to the money. And I want to show you just how much they're in the pocket. They're in the pocket. This interview right here, very revealing from Netanyahu. Again, like I said, Israel's own words are its worst enemy. Listen to this.
But you're in the wrong place. And he said, why? He said, because you should be in America. He said, why America? He said, because America will be the rising power in the world. There may be a world conflict. America will emerge as the great power, and America can make Britain do what Britain doesn't want to do. That is, recognize a Jewish state. Well, they went to America. Jabotinsky died, and my father continued alone during the during the war years, agitating for Zionism. He was all of 32. And he began, that's in 1942. He decided to do something that no Jewish leader did before.
Did you hear what he just said? He said his father was like, you need to go to America. He said his father was agitating for Zionism.
He went to the Republicans. And he went to Senator Taft, who was a very great senator, because Roosevelt would not hear of a Jewish state. He was absolutely opposed to it. He didn't want to antagonize the British. He thought that the British wanted to cater to the Arabs. He simply would not do it. He was a great leader, but it was for the Jewish people, that wasn't good. So not being able to persuade the Democrats, he went to the Republicans.
Everybody hear this? You want to see where the right wing, the extreme right wing government came from in Israel? Listen to what he said. He went to the Republicans because the Democrats would not hear of a Jewish state, right?
And he said to Senator Taft to advocate, to put in the Republican National Convention on the platform, support for unrestricted Jewish immigration and a Jewish state. Well, Roosevelt didn't like it, but 3 months later, he had no choice. The Democratic National Convention adopted a similar platform. So in many ways, my father was the progenitor of the bipartisan American support for Israel. But of course, he did.
You hear that? His father was the progenitor of the bipartisan support for Israel. This man talks too much. His own mouth gets him into trouble. I sincerely hope that the UN Security Council goes a step further. And I sincerely hope that they call for the ceasefire. Because other than that, Israel can continue to bomb Palestinians in Gaza. And as long as they continue to say that we're defending ourselves, what are we going to do? So I'm ready for the next set when you are, Eric. So it's a first step. This ruling from the ICJ, the way I see it as a first step, but we need to go further. Caden says softball ruling though. Yep. Thank you, M. Smith. The Supreme Court can't enforce their rulings either. Hasn't stopped them from ruining plenty of lives. It's a good point. Thank you, Sparky. Denazify Israel. Thank you for this as well. Great to see you, Sabby. Great to see you too. Something is happening here with the hair. Thank you for the super chat, Dijon. Focus on the topic, not typos. Joker, Cooper, flat tire. The third next, put or shut up. I don't know what you mean here, Dijon, but thank you for the super chat. Thank you, DMB. Great coverage on the crisis in Gaza. Thank you. Thank you for the super sticker, Helena. Lorez says, love the football analogy, Sabby. Thank you. I thought you liked that. I thought you got to appreciate the football analogy. Thank you for this as well, Sparky. BB and company figure this is their last dance to achieve their dream of a greater Israel. So they're pulling out all the stops. Reputation be damned. And you know what? One thing I'm going to tell you about this, what's happening, this does not make Jewish people safe. It really doesn't. Thank you, New York Varsity. Handing the ball off milks the clock, and Gazans are running out of time. Thank you, Sparky. The Duran explained at this stage of the ICJ case against Israel, asking for a ceasefire would mess up the genocide charge, making it where there would be a ceasefire or genocide case. That's interesting. I'll have to check that out. Thank you as well for this one. It was some sort of legal technicality or strategy issue, I think. Interesting. I'll check that out. If they went live today, they should. That probably is the video they have today. I'll check it out. Thank you for this as well, Sparky. Go Yemen, fight the power. Thank you, Jay. Is there somewhere we can send donations to the lawsuit in Oakland or sign a petition if possible? I'll have to look into that and I'll let you know. Thank you for this as well, Dijon. So-called citizens come first, right? Not for the current administration. They don't care about us, Dijon. Thank you for this as well, Sparky. South Africa and the ICJ nailed Israel so far. Sounds like it's sort of at a probable cause hearing stage. Wheels of justice are slow, but the fix could have easily been in ending the case. Interesting. Thank you so much for that. Is that a comment on Rockfin, Eric? If so, I can go ahead and take that. Thank you. Thank you so much for the tip on Rockfin, Dave Burt. If you guys have not had a chance to do so, go ahead and smash that like button. That helps me with the algo. And if you are new, don't forget to sub and share. We're going to go on to this story here about Piers Morgan and MIKO PELED. They had a little bit of a debate. And Piers actually put this interview off for quite a while, and MIKO had announced it, and he said he postponed it, et cetera. And I think he just continued postponing it. But they finally did have this discussion. I think this conversation should have been a longer discussion. I felt like, Piers, you shouldn't have shortchanged MIKO PELED like this, because I've seen you had longer discussions with people, but you got to know who MIKO PELED is. MIKO PELED, remember, he wrote the book, The General's Son. His dad was a general in the IDF. He is a strong advocate for the Palestinian people and the BDS movement. So he is Jewish. He is very well aware what has happened to the Palestinian people. And that makes me wonder if that's why Piers did not extend this interview, the time of this interview. I think it should have been longer. But they have this discussion about the Houthis. And I want to show you something Piers does during this discussion. He think he's slick, but we're going to call it out. Let's go ahead and get into it.
The US and UK have unleashed a series of joint fresh airstrikes against Houthi targets in Yemen. The strikes targeted an underground storage site, missiles and other military capabilities. In a joint statement, they said their aim remains to de-escalate tensions and restore stability in the Red Sea. Rishi Sunak went one step further, calling it self-defense.
We urge the Houthis and those who enable them to stop these illegal and unacceptable attacks. But if necessary, the United Kingdom will not hesitate to respond again in self-defense.
So is it self-defense? And are the strikes doing anything but de-escalating the situation in the Middle East or escalating them? Joining me now to discuss this is the son of the IDF general, PELED, who is now a Palestinian activist, MIKO PELED, and Yemeni journalist Louai Ahmed. Well, welcome to both of you. Let me start with...
You guys see what he did, right? So you know he has opposing sides. So he'll have the pro-Palestine side and he'll have the the anti-Palestine side or whatever. So let me tell you what Piers did. Obviously, they're talking about the Houthis. The Houthis are from Yemen. So Piers think he's slick. So what he does is let me bring on a Yemeni journalist who has an opposing view to the Houthis. You know, it's like those times like when Fox News is like, let me bring on that one black conservative to prove that this is not a racial issue. He think he's slick, but I see you, Piers. I see you.
With you, MIKO, to me, it seems pretty straightforward. You've got a bunch of Houthis who are firing rockets to try and stop, I think it's nearly 15% of the world's trade, maybe more, coming through the Red Sea. And they have to be stopped, don't they?
Well, thanks for having me on the show, Piers. I would frame it slightly differently. I think what we're seeing is Yemeni forces acting responsibly in response to a genocide taking place in Palestine. And we've seen over the last month or so, or excuse me, 3 months or so, we've seen a heightening of the genocide with the tens of thousands of Palestinian civilians being massacred.
What does that have to do with the Houthis in Yemen? With all...
You see how he just jumps across and interrupts MIKO?
And, well, the international community has to act. If the international community does not act to stop Israel, nothing will. And countries around the world needs to act. And I think what the Yemeni forces are doing are one of the only responsible actions that we've seen. The other one, of course, has been the South Africans with a petition to the ICJ. The international community cannot continue to ignore what is happening in Palestine, a 75-year-old genocide and apartheid regime. And when one country decides to step up and do the responsible thing and respond, they're being bombed by the Americans and the British.
What is responsible about firing rockets at cargo ships coming through the Red Sea? What is responsible about that?
First of all, it's their waters, right? It's their waters. Second of all, to MIKO's point, the international community has to show up for the Palestinian people. And that's what the Houthis are doing. Now, you can have your criticisms of the Houthis, but the thing is, who is coming to the defense of the Palestinian people? Are they supposed to allow weapons to just go across their waters to continue to kill these people? You know, so to me, like, that's the thing. And I don't get this at all. I don't get this, because my thing is, you got one group trying to stop a genocide, and then you got people like Piers who are like, let's let it continue. Let's let the Palestinian people continue to be slaughtered. And the Houthis are saying, like, no, stop it. And they know because their country, people in their country were destroyed by weapons that came from the United States. They know what it's like.
Well, what is responsible is, first of all, the blockade of the Bab el-Mandab is an act of resistance. It's an act in response to the lack of action, the severe criminal lack of action by the rest of the world.
I think that's what Iran. I think that's
of the genocide taking place.
I would say I want to come to my other guest.
That is the issue.
All right, let me come to Louai.
That's what Piers doesn't want to talk about. Piers doesn't want to talk about the genocide. Piers just wants to focus on the fact that the Houthis are stopping those ships from delivering those weapons. He makes it seem like this group just rose up one day and is like, I'm not going to allow any of those ships to deliver any of the supplies, with no backstory to go with it. So when MIKO starts off by discussing the genocide and he jumps in and he says, well, what does that have to do with the Houthis? That has everything to do with what they are doing. That has everything to do with it. It's disingenuous to sit here and pretend like it does not.
You can't take it out of context, Piers.
Well, actually, you shouldn't bring it into.
Ignore the Palestinian issue.
I think it's being deliberately conflated. It's being deliberately conflated as a context because Iran wants people to think that way. Let me bring in Luai Ahmed. Let me bring in Luai Ahmed, please, the other guest. Luai, your view of what you just heard.
Yeah, I think it's actually quite insulting to say that what the Houthis are doing are acting responsibly. The Houthis.
See, I told you he did this on purpose. He is a Yemeni journalist. So what he did was he's like, let me find a Yemeni journalist that is against what the Houthis are doing and bring this person on. You know, it's like I said, it's like when Fox News was like, let me find that one black conservative that I can bring on to the show that'll actually be against, you know, what's happening with the George Floyd protests. That's what he did.
Took over Yemen, northern Yemen by force. They slaughtered people, they killed people. It is a terrorist group that acts with violence and does not care about the Yemenis. Ever since the Houthis took over northern Yemen, more than 21 million Yemenis are in need of humanitarian aid.
Why is that though? Because we're going to talk about this as well. Why did the Houthis even begin? Why are people in Yemen in need of humanitarian aid? Who slaughtered the people? Who bombed the country? That was Saudi Arabia. Where did they get the weapons from? The United States government. But he wants you to just sit here and believe that the humanitarian crisis is all because of the Houthis.
10 million Yemeni children are starving. So if the Houthis were to act responsibly, they would take care of their own people. They would take care of their own starving population. Yemen is the biggest humanitarian crisis in the Middle East.
Because of Saudi Arabia. Because they were bombed. And that's why, and that's the same thing that can happen to Gaza. That's why they're trying to put a stop to the weapons coming in.
And it's been perpetrated also by a war with Saudi Arabia that happened because they took over the northern part of Yemen. So the Houthis should mind their own business and care about their own people who live in famine. The Yemenis do not need another war. And one of the reasons that many people in the West are supporting Houthis and supporting their actions is because they're just looking for any hero to bomb Israel. I mean, even if Hitler was alive today and he started bombing Israel, they would.
Let me pause. I just want to ask you guys a question. Did I miss something? Are the Houthis bombing Israel? You see, there's a difference between a ship and land. So it's one thing that they're trying to stop these ships from coming in with the weapons. It's another thing if they're actually bombing Israel. I don't know.
All call him a hero because they blindly hate Israel and they cannot see the nuances. And most of them don't even know the slightest bit of the Houthis, because the Houthis are not a country like he says. They're a militia. They're a sect that took over the northern part of Yemen. They're not the legitimate power in Yemen, but they took over the country by force. So they don't really have any legitimacy as an internationally recognized government.
Now, let me call him out here, right? Didn't Zionists take over Israel? Or Palestine, excuse me, I should say. Didn't Zionists take over Palestine? Displace the Palestinian people? Create the state of Israel? I can't make this up, man. I can't make this one up.
And they're also backed by Iran, which is trying to impose its power on the rest of the Middle East. And I mean, I need not tell you about what Iran has been doing in the Middle East for the past.
Isn't Israel trying to impose its power on the rest of the Middle East? So let me see. You see the problem, guys? So it seems to be okay when Israel does these things. It's just not okay when other countries do these things.
20, 30 years. They've also assassinated all of their secular leaders.
Yeah.
Next month, they're assassinating Fatima Al-Awri, who is a human rights advocate who has been criticizing them. So it's kind of insulting to say that they're acting responsibly just because they're attacking Israel.
To be honest, I've heard.
We're going to talk about leaders. Do you say anything when the U.S. government assassinates other leaders in these countries? When they take out leaders? Causing groups like the reason why some of those groups form is because the U.S. government oftentimes has come into these countries, they've removed these leaders or they've assassinated these leaders, and other groups form. We've talked about this before with the show about Saddam Hussein. When the U.S. government took out Saddam Hussein, that gave way for ISIS. That's why they were able to form. When Saddam Hussein was still in power, he was able to keep those kind of groups in check. I can't.
Both sides now. I just think the idea it's responsible is for the birds. It's utterly irresponsible. It's warmongering. It's deliberately inflammatory. It's at Iran's behest. And they're getting the bloody nose they deserve from the US and UK, who are trying to preserve nearly 15% of the world's trade from going down in the Red Sea. I can't think of anything more responsible than the response that's coming their way. Anyway, thank you.
Now he's going to try to pretend like it's just about trade. You know weapons are on those ships, Piers. You know those ships aren't just carrying no damn supplies. You know there are weapons on those ships. He is more upset. Listen to this, guys. Piers Morgan is more upset at the Houthis attacking a ship with supplies for trade and weapons than he is at Israel committing genocide against the Palestinian people. He has more anger over property, over items, than he does at the death of the Palestinian people. It's a very revealing moment. So I want you to see a little bit of this for yourself so you can actually see who are the Houthis. Al Jazeera did a great piece on this a while back. Listen to this.
So who are the Houthis? They began in the 90s as a moderate theological movement of the Zaydis, that's a Shia minority group. Fighting corruption was one of their main aims. The 2003 U.S. invasion of Iraq was a turning point. Analysts believe the war transformed the Houthis into a resistance group.
Pause. That part right there. The 2003 invasion of Iraq. Some believe that that is what transformed the Houthis group into a resistance group. Now, he brought on that Yemeni journalist. He didn't tell you about this, though. He didn't talk about the U.S. invasion of Iraq and that and the fact that that had on the Houthis. He didn't tell you about that, but that's okay. That's why you got me here.
Deep anti-American sentiments. In 2015, Houthi fighters seized Yemen's capital, Sana'a. That triggered more than 9 years of war between the Saudi-led coalition, which backs the internationally recognized government, and the Houthis, supported by Iran. On October the 31st, the Houthis entered the war in Gaza, firing drones and missiles at Israel. And earlier this month, the Houthis said they would target all ships heading towards Israel. We're joined now by Hussein al-Bukaiti, political analyst aligned with the Houthi movement, and he's joining us live from Sana'a. Very good to have you with us, Mr. Bukaiti. What's your response to this international task force? Are the Houthis worried about attacks by the U.S. and its allies?
No, they are not worried at all, because when they have taken the decision to target Israeli ship or Israeli-linked ship or any ship from any country going to any port of Israel, they will aware that the United States or Israel might take an action, and they did their action because, as they say, it is in solidarity and it is actually an obligation to do so. That's why, as well, if you see the alliance that the United States now has formed, Yemeni has been under attack and blockade for almost 9 years, and many countries in this alliance, they were fully supporting the Saudi backed forces, and at the end what happened, the Yemeni army has become stronger. They they had actually defeated Saudi Arabia to reach its goal. That's why I'm sure, as Mohammed Abdul Salam today had a statement a few hours ago, he said we will continue our operation against any.
Okay, I want to chime in here when he talked about solidarity. Mr. Positivity, perfect timing. As a Muslim, we are required by Allah to stand with Muslims anywhere who are being oppressed. This could be by protesting in the US or doing as the Houthis do. Houthis are simply defending our bros and sis. So you see that?
As they declared before, unless the food and medicine will be allowed into Gaza. And then they are well aware that the United States might attack Yemen, but they have said any country that will be involved in attacking Yemen, their ships and oil tanker, and as well this country itself, it will be harmed and it will be attacked. I'm thinking that United States might be forcing the Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates actually to break the truce that has been
Well, are you
signed
worried that they
between,
might do that? The Saudi Arabia and the
those
United
countries.
Arab Emirates are not part of this task force. Are you worried that they will join the task force? What does that mean for peace between Saudis and the Houthis?
I mean, they were in direct war against Yemen and they couldn't do anything. And when they actually signed this agreement, they were forced because of the attack against Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates. We remember that this truce was in Yemen was actually announced after the major attack against Aramco facility in Jeddah. That's why Saudi Arabia and United States at this point, I don't think they want Yemen to target the oil infrastructure, because as you mentioned in your report that now the oil prices and gas prices has increased, and I believe this is actually why Yemeni have done this latest action, because they know that you can only hurt the West in their pocket, and especially as well Israel by targeting those ships.
Many of the ships. Let's pause there. Sorry, she talks over him a bit, but I wanted to add this part when he brought up the oil and the gas. You see, the real frustration in reference to the Houthis is not just so much about the fact that they're preventing those weapons or trying to prevent those weapons from getting to Israel. It's also the fact that they are disrupting capital. So you heard what he just said. The gas prices have gone up. I keep telling you guys, at the end of the day, it always comes back to money. That's why they're upset. About 2.5 years ago, those of us at RBN, we had a general strike summit. Some people, we didn't even have 10,000 subscribers at that time. Some people lost their shit because we hosted a 3-day general strike summit, multiple panels where people came on to talk about different issues and basically to advocate for the reason why we need a general strike to get real change in this country. Even when it comes to these damn wars, we have to disrupt capital. That's how people listen. Look at what's happening to McDonald's in France. The farmers are have actually taken, grass and stuff from their farm and dumped it inside the McDonald's. People boycotting the McDonald's because they're actively funding the genocide in Gaza, right? You have to disrupt capital. That's when people hear you. The protests are great. Don't get me wrong. I think we still need to keep up the protests, but at some point or another, and I still stand by this, we need to have a general strike in this damn country. We need to have a general strike, and the way that you do it is you disrupt the flow of goods. You do that by the truckers going on strike, the port workers on the West Coast going on strike, along with the truckers, the railroad workers going on strike. You see, Joe Biden knew that that would disrupt capital. That is why he prevented that from happening. That's when they listen to you, peeps. That's when your voice is heard. Disrupt the capital, and that's how you get your damn ceasefire. You can do that for any issue. Any issue. You guys tired of this inflation? You tired of the high prices? You tired of the economic issues? You tired, you pissed and mad that they won't give everybody health care in this country? General strike. Make your demands. You disrupt capital, and then they listen to you. Let's go to some of the comments here in the chat. Thank you for the super chat. Juliet says, thank you, Sabby. Thank you, Juliet. Juliet is actually the one that informed me about the history of a general strike. And there actually was one in this country in Seattle many, many, many years ago. Thank you, Sparky. Wasn't Indonesia bringing a case against Israel at the ICJ from a different angle? South Africa has the genocide angle covered. Maybe the Indonesia angle is the ceasefire part. I can't remember. Yes, Indonesia's case is not about the genocide. It is about the occupation and oppression of the Palestinian people, which includes the displacement of the people in the West Bank. So they're taking a different angle. But yeah, thank you for that. Yes, he says, good article, Huff posts regarding AIPAC full expose. Ooh, I'm surprised that's coming from the Huffington Post. Thank you for the super chat, Sparky. Yemen was only blocking Israel-bound ships, which didn't stop world trade through the Suez Canal. The UK and the US response to Yemen is what stopped world trade through the Suez Canal. Thank you, Buckeye fan. Vince McMahon has resigned from the WWE/TKO. Interesting. Huh. Do people still watch wrestling? I haven't watched wrestling since I was a kid. Thank you, George. We are witnessing end stage Zionism. Hashtag end stage Zionism. Thank you, Sparky. Ansar Allah, the Houthis represent the legitimate Yemen government. This Yemen journalist represents the U.S. puppet government of Yemen. Well said. Thank you so much for that, Sparky. We're moving on to our next story here. Oh boy. BRIE and ROBBIE had another debate on Rising about DEI. And there was one part of this discussion I was like, oh, they're talking about college admissions. Let me jump into this. Let me jump in because I think there are strong points made by both of them. But this all came about, this discussion came about because of the libs of TikTok. You guys remember this woman. There's controversy over the fact that she was appointed to a key position in the Department of Education. I think it's the Oklahoma Department of Education. And people are saying that she was not qualified for that position. So is she technically a DEI hire, right? That's what they're saying. So DEI is different in different circumstances. Like I told you, when I worked at MIT, a female hire was considered a DEI hire. A female college student was considered a DEI a student, so to speak, just because of the overwhelmingly male population at MIT. But let's go ahead and get into this conversation. This is a very interesting discussion. And like I said, they both make good points. Let's dive in.
Top Oklahoma school official Ryan Walters has appointed Libs of TikTok head Chaya Ratchik to the Library Media Advisory Committee at the State Department of Education. Libs of TikTok often post videos about LGBTQ plus teachers in schools, classifying them as groomers.
Walters said in a statement, Chaya Ratchik is on the front lines showing the world exactly what the radical left is all about, lowering standards, porn in schools, and pushing woke indoctrination on our kids. Her unique perspective is invaluable as part of my plan to make Oklahoma schools safer for kids and friendlier to parents, per the Huffington Post.
It's interesting that he raises the idea of lowering standards, given that I couldn't find any evidence that this woman would be qualified to do any job in education whatsoever. And there are some obvious conflicts of interest here to have someone working at a school board that seems not to respect the basic rights of gay people in this country to even be teachers in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, it's the board for the library specifically. I mean, I have a hard time seeing this as anything other than of kind of own the libs stunt. I think she has, every right to post on social media criticisms of wokeness and the other things she sees. But just as I wouldn't want Robin DiAngelo or Ibram X. Kendi on the library board because they're like deeply committed left-wing activist type people with shoddy scholarship. I similarly don't think this person who's kind of a performer social media personality
Ibram
has any
X.
reason to be
Kendi
here.
and Robin DiAngelo scholarship makes Raya Chaddick, I should say, makes their scholarship look like they're Nobel Prize laureates who should be esteemed above all else. They have, at the bare minimum, written books and been degreed in some areas of relevant expertise here. I mean, Raya Chaddick, this is someone who has been part of many a kind of cancel culture book ban campaign against a number of books that are considered to be classics in American literature. It really does seem like certain Republicans are pushing a kind of authoritarian overreach that has already been proven to be not especially successful politically. We're now in a realm where the candidates in the Republican primary who branded themselves largely as anti-woke candidates, both Ron DeSantis and Vivek Ramaswamy, have fallen out. Even Donald Trump doesn't hit those notes as hard as those two ever did. And it seems like that lesson is slowly perhaps going to be learned in other parts of the country. We'll see what kind of local pushback there is to this clearly kind of a political appointment that doesn't seem well tailored to actually improving the education of kids in Oklahoma.
Let me pause here for a second. So, long story short, this woman from Libs of TikTok is not qualified for the position. Now, where are all the people like Bill Ackman who came after Claudine Gray and said she was a DEI hire? Why isn't Bill Ackman speaking out against this woman getting this position at the Department of Education and she has no experience in that field? Why isn't he calling that a DEI hire? It goes on. It gets, wait for it.
Yeah, Oklahoma ranks 48th out of 50 states for the quality of education, so they have a long way to go. Again, I don't have any problem with efforts to get to have parents exercise some control over whether there are pornographic books on the shelves or age-inappropriate material. Some of this is certainly going too far and banning or resulting in Florida and other places, titles being taken off the shelves that I think are perfectly fine. This seems honestly like a case where most reasonable people can draw a clear line that, again, the one book with the picture of someone performing fellatio on a dildo is not age appropriate for the school library, and the blue.
That has nothing to do with this woman being hired for a position that she wasn't qualified for, though.
Dye is fine, and like we don't need to have some big fight over it, or I wish we didn't.
Unfortunately, we do, because these book bans are happening all across the country. The response to this has obviously been varied. Ken Klippenstein weighed in. Obviously, we have him on a guest in the show all the time, and he is known for doing reporting that are based on FOIA requests. He quote tweeted this story from Rolling Stone, writing, "FOIA time." That tweet has gotten over 18,000 likes, and there's a lot of pushback and anger in the replies. The obvious implication here is that because she's now a part of the government, that she is now vulnerable to getting these freedom of information requests, and who knows what that might turn up. I don't know if that's something that she wants to necessarily expose herself to. Up until this point, she's largely been a private citizen who's been able to have the protections of a private citizen.
Now let's fast forward till we get to the part about this part right here, because here's the other thing. There was this statement from Charlie Kirk about not feeling comfortable with the black pilot. Listen to this.
Story hits so hard because we've all been in the back of a plane when the turbulence hits, or when you're flying through a storm and you're like, I'm so glad I saw the guy with the right stuff and the square jaw get into the cockpit before we took off, and I feel better now.
No, I mean, like, you want to go thought crime? Like, I'm sorry, if I see a black pilot, I'm going to be like, boy, I hope he's qualified.
Well, that's the you wouldn't have done that. You wouldn't have. You wouldn't have done that before.
That's not an immediate.
No, you wouldn't have done that before.
That's not who I am. That's not what I believe.
No, that is who you are. And just what? So to that point, with the libs of TikTok chick being appointed in that position, is Charlie going to ask and wonder if she's qualified? She's not. this is where it gets a little heated.
Yeah, I mean, what he's saying, though, is that because of, and I don't know that this is what is in place at United, but because of affirmative action or race-based hiring or admissions, it causes some people to wrongly and unfairly question whether people who are admitted or hired under those specifications are then not as qualified as other people, which is very, I'm sure, damaging and racist toward those people, which is why we just shouldn't practice. We should practice colorblind hiring and admissions.
Well, okay. There's a lot of things that should happen that just don't happen. The reason why they even have these things in place is because people were not practicing colorblind hiring and admissions. That's why. Now, one of the things I can tell you, a lot of jobs today, particularly say the professional jobs, a lot of the professional jobs today, when you submit your application, most of the time these applications are online. A lot of these companies in the HR department, they have an ATS, right? So ATS is the applicant tracking system. Typically what happens is your resume goes through that system. The system picks up certain keywords from the resume, usually words that are tailored to the job description. This is why you're supposed to rewrite your resume a couple of times, depending on the description or the job you're applying for, right? So it'll pick up a couple of those things. And then those resumes, the ones that tend to match the job description more, are sent over to HR first. Usually they pick between those and they decide, okay, which ones am I going to send to the hiring manager? And then the hiring manager goes through the applications that are sent to them. So to that point, even when it comes to DEI, you still have to have the keywords, and usually the keywords are in reference to the qualifications for the job. You still have to have the keywords that's going to trigger the ATS system in the first place for the HR manager to actually pull your resume, because there's hundreds of resumes. Okay. So like one job can have like 200 people can apply for like one job. So it has to trigger those keywords that have to do with the job description and your experience. So even in the case of a lot of these hires where people say it's a DEI hire, usually they still have somewhat of some experience in reference to the job, unless it's an entry level position. Listen to this part.
Well, I think it really demonstrates a lot of ignorance about what the affirmative action process actually is. The point is that if you have two qualified candidates, you can then move to other factors to try to get more demographic diversity or economic diversity, people who are poor, people who are from different parts of the country, things like that, at least when we're talking about college admissions. If you want to live in a world where people, everybody in college.
That's not how it's worked for college admissions.
It is how it's worked. That's literally, quota systems were made unconstitutional in the 1970s. So that's quite literally how affirmative action policies work. And certainly black pilots have to, and black pilots have to pass all of the same laws and regulations and rules, obviously, as white pilots.
The court decisions in the early 2000s, they used systems that assigned points to people based on race.
Right. That's not a quota system.
So let me jump in here, folks, because I come from this field, right? So I worked in the university system for over 10 years, and I actually have been a part of admission committees multiple times. So I'm going to tell you what happens to those applications. Get ready. Here we go. So when you apply to these universities, first and foremost, for those of us that are on the admissions committee, the applications are filtered, at least from my experience, are filtered first by merit. How many of you knew that? Not by race, not by gender, merit. So this is where your SAT scores, or if you're applying to grad school, your GMAT, your GRE, this is where those things actually matter. So we sort the applications based on your test scores first. After that was GPA. So what I can tell you from my experience, oftentimes most of the Black applicants, and remember, I worked at some pretty top schools, right? So I worked at MIT, I worked at Boston University, I worked at Harvard University. So just keep that in mind. So most of the time, a lot of the Black applicants don't even fall into that filter system for the first two qualifications. The test scores came first, the GPA came second. Just FYI, I'm telling you how we did this. Then there's other things, there's other factors. Extracurricular activities, that's always a plus. It's always a bonus to see that you're, they want a well-rounded student. That's like this thing. So they want that. If you have a part-time job, I always felt that that was a good thing. But believe it or not, a lot of these admission committees don't actually see that as a good thing over extracurricular activities. You actually benefit more if you have been in school organizations or clubs, or if you played a sport. Let's say you were part of band. That actually helps your application and makes it stronger than if you put on your application that you had a part-time job. I don't agree with that. I don't, because I think, I know when I was in high school, one of my friends had a part-time job, not by choice, but because she had to work because her mom could not work. So you never know people's financial situation. So I think that having a part-time job is just as important as being a part of a school organization, right? There's also this factor. Not everybody can participate in school organizations and clubs because their parents can't pick them up after school. Not everybody has that option or that opportunity. But those are the things that they would look at. Here's where the DEI part comes in. Now, I didn't went through all of that. We didn't went through all of that. Then there's the factor of, okay, we have all these applicants. Whoa, all of the top applicants are male. So then obviously, they're going to try to find a way to incorporate more females. Then there's the racial aspect. Obviously, they're going to try to find a way to incorporate more people, Black people, Asian people, etc., right? But the point that I want to make is this. If you don't meet the merit qualifications, you're not getting into the school. Regardless, if you're Black, if you're Latino, there is a threshold that these colleges, and especially depending on which program you're applying to, they want you to meet. If you don't meet that threshold, you're not getting into those universities. You know who actually has more leeway in reference to college admissions? Not Black applicants, not Latino applicants, right? It's not actually on the basis of race. It's on the basis of legacy. And BRIE's going to get into that. We're going to talk about the legacy admissions, which I never agreed with. I always thought it was bullshit. I never thought it was fair that you automatically get into this school because your parents are a legacy from this, because you're legacy from the school, because your parent went there or your grandparents went there. And in fact, a lot of these elite academic institutions, a lot of these students that are admitted are legacy students. Let's get into it.
That's not equally qualified people.
Yes, it is. If you pass a bare minimum assessment of what it qualifies you to get into a school, you, like what I said, you can then, I'm talking more broadly than school.
You got
I'm talking
more
about
points
pilot
for your
things.
race than your ACT and SAT score. That is absolutely true.
That's not true, Robbie.
It is in fact true.
When you look at who is admitted to the
I got to agree with BRIE on this one. That's actually not true. I don't know where that's coming from, but that has never been my experience.
First of all, I know you'd love for this racist statement from Robbie, from Charlie Kirk to be not the subject of the conversation. But what we're talking about is Charlie Kirk saying that pilots who attain the exact same number of flight hours and pass the exact same tests to become pilots, who have no indication that their track record of crashes is higher than anybody else. As you pointed out in a recent episode, the number of planes that actually go down are so incredibly low that it's a statistical anomaly in the first instance. And I couldn't find any instances in which a Black pilot was involved, despite all of in a crash. Despite all of that, Charlie Kirk still feels comfortable saying that he is going to cast judgments and be concerned about whether or not he's going to die when he's in a plane piloted by a black person. And instead of taking that and looking at that and saying, well, maybe I should revise how I'm judging other people of minority backgrounds and other aspects of my life, and that is my own internalized bigotry and racism, he's justifying it in a very similar way that you seem to be justifying it here, saying the reality of affirmative action compels me to have a racist view as I carry out my life. And all of that in the face of obvious evidence that, for example, Raya Chaddock, with no qualifications, is being appointed to an important district position in Oklahoma.
Well, what did I say?
And no
They shouldn't do
evidence.
that.
And also with the evidence that something like 40%, I don't know, it's not something like, actually 40% of Harvard admittees, people who are admitted to Harvard, are either legacies or athletes.
And they shouldn't.
That is 100% correct. And I'm telling you guys, if you want to be angry about the admission system and who gets in and who doesn't get in, you need to start with the legs first. Start with the legacy applicants first. And I've said this time and time again, it is not fair. It is not fair that they get in just because their parent was able to attend that school. That's not right. And that's where some of these admissions, like she said, 40% of them. 40%. That's where you really got to raise the issue, the legacy admissions. So why aren't people like Bill Ackman upset about the legacy admissions in reference to these schools? You know why? Because Bill has a daughter, and Bill's daughter goes to Harvard. And Bill went to Harvard. So Bill benefits from that system. And that's what it was all about, guys. That's what I was trying to tell you. It wasn't really about no plagiarism or none of that bullshit. It was about Bill Ackman trying to find a way to make sure that Jewish people in this country would benefit from the DEI system, whether at these universities or employment as well. The next person who interviews Bill Ackman need to ask him, how does he feel about legacy-based admissions? That'll be a doozy.
No one is.
What do you mean no one? Here I am, a person saying that all those things were a bad idea.
No one outside of this table. The overwhelming force of the attacks from people like Charlie Kirk and the people from his political cohort are attacking affirmative action. Whereas Charlie Kirk or Christopher Rufo launched a national political campaign against legacy, not performatively saying, oh, legacies are bad too, the way that you've just done, but actually asking for segments to be produced on this show, which has never happened, on the legacy crisis. I don't see people in the wings saying, oh, we got to do another legacy segment because it's such an unconscionable slight on the American education system.
So that was interesting to hear. It sounds like BRIE has wanted to talk about this before, the legacy admissions. I'm telling you, legacy admission is a big problem. It is a big problem, but it seems like the folks at the Hill weren't interested in doing that.
That so many people, poor, stupid, rich kids are getting allowed into school because their parents happen to go to those same kinds of schools. That is absolutely not the kind of conversation we're having. And it's worth asking the question why the focus is specifically on race and sometimes gender and very much so LGBTQ people, and not ever on the bulk of the college classes, which are made up of people who don't deserve to be there because their parents are rich.
There was a legal justification for fighting it on the race grounds, given that racial discrimination is illegal and discrimination based on legacy status is not. I would be absolutely fine for all of those policies to be stripped away, and I've called for them to be stripped away over and over again. I support them being stripped away. So what are we having an argument about?
But your contention is that there's no way to get rid of legacy programs.
You want to get rid of the legacy programs and keep the race-based admissions.
No, your contention just there is there's no way to get rid of legacy.
I want to get rid of both of them.
Your contention just there is that there's no way to get rid of a legacy program because it is not legacy status is not a constitutionally protected status, and therefore we shouldn't try to change policies in the United States of America.
No, I didn't say we shouldn't try to change policies. I think that's why they brought lawsuits over the race.
No, then what is the excuse for not having people like Christopher Rufo ever trying to challenge those kind of policies? There are many ways to challenge them.
Because there wasn't a legal justification to do it.
That's not true.
So let me explain something here. When you go to schools like MIT, you go to schools like Princeton, there are certain opportunities that are open to you that are not open to people that attend a school like the University of Massachusetts. It's just a reality. And the reason why I have that beef with the legacy admissions is because those kids get in just because of who their daddy is. That's not fair. It just, you don't even have to be a top student. You get in because your daddy went there. If your application can get rejected, slim chance, but in the chance that your application can get rejected, your daddy can make a call to the school. These things actually do happen. So you at birth are already awarded certain opportunities that others are not because your dad went to this school. And people can say whatever they want, but I'm going to keep it real for you. There are certain opportunities that are open to students that attend those elite academic institutions like a Stanford, like a Princeton, that are not open to people that go to some of these state schools. It is just a reality of the situation. Why do you think those schools are so expensive to begin with? Let's continue.
You're saying that you can only challenge something if it's a constitutionally protected class? There's not any other kind of lawsuit that can be brought? There's not any other kind of protest movement
you
that
love
can
to do,
happen?
we can't do X until we do Y, and if we do, like...
What are you talking about?
This is the same thing as but we can't hold anyone accountable for plagiarism until we have Alan Dershowitz hauled before a committee or something.
What are you talking about? We should hold everybody accountable for plagiarism. I've said that a million times.
They should not practice racial discrimination in hiring or admissions. They fought the law forbids it, and a group of people who had been discriminated against in concert with conservative scholars, activists, and groups, etc., fought to establish that policy, which I agree.
All right.
Sorry.
Well,
tough.
You agree. You and Charlie Kirk of one mind on this one. I see. More right.
Not on.
You.
No. No.
We'll go ahead and we'll go ahead and stop it there. But if you want to see the rest of that video, that was funny. The rest of the video, it is libs of TikTok named to Oklahoma Department of Education. Kirk suggests black pilots are unqualified. Yeah, it was a heated discussion, but BRIE was funny there with that point. But yeah, I mean, again, from my experience, you still have to meet the merit qualifications. Right? Same thing as to be a pilot. Obviously, you still have to pass the test. People don't just pick up someone off the street and say, he's black, you're hired. Like, you still got to meet those qualifications. So that's an important piece there. Good conversation, though, between BRIE and Robbie. Thank you for the super chat, NY Varsity. In 2019, the Saudis offered Trump a large amount of money to operate with the Saudi against Yemen. Look up Trump pimps out soldiers. Interesting. I agree with you, Zen Soulful. HR is a problem. Yes. We can do a whole show about HR. I got some stories. You got some stories. We could do a whole show. Rondo says Bill Ackman's daughter was a DEI admission. Oh, man. You guys are cracking me up. Okay. We are moving to the final story here, which is Joe Rogan. This clip went viral on Twitter, and it is a video clip of Joe Rogan. I think this is Bobby Lee. I think this is this guy's name. He's having a conversation about Israel and Gaza, and people are calling Joe Rogan out for it because all of a sudden Joe Rogan is trying to play dumb. So I was one of those people. I said, listen to Joe Rogan pretend that Israel and Gaza is complicated. Joe Rogan interviewed multiple guests on his show about this conflict. Now, all of a sudden, he says it's complicated and he's not an expert. Just admit you're afraid to criticize Israel, Joe. And I was actually surprised because this tweet received like 3.2K views. I was shocked by that, but let's get into this discussion here. Listen to this.
LA and,
Oh, I hear you.
Yeah.
Look, it's a complicated issue.
It's so complicated.
And it's terrifying.
Yeah.
When you look at the video of when they do an overhead of what Gaza used to look like and what it looks like now.
I mean.
So you heard what he said, right? It's a complicated issue. What did I tell you about that? When people say, oh, when it comes to Israel and Gaza, it's complicated. I told you before, that's a cop-out. It's not complicated. People can explain it to you in like 5 minutes. It's actually not. That's a way to not really actively criticize Israel. Just say that it's complicated. Okay, let's go on.
It's insane. It's fucking insane.
It's gonna take over a year to clean up just the rubble.
Oh my God.
But it's like 25,000 now?
At least.
At least.
They don't know how many people are dead. They have no idea.
And just
half the population is women and children.
And the trauma.
Uh-huh.
And the fucking, famine. It's just, I just can't even comprehend it, really.
Yeah, and the Israelis tell you that it's necessary. And that they have to get rid of Hamas. And this is the way to do it.
But Joe Rogan knows this talking point. This has been explained to Joe Rogan multiple times on his show. And I'm sorry, I'm come back because I'm going to show you this clip in just a second. This was explained to Joe Rogan what was happening to the Palestinian people before the war even started, before October 7th. This is how I'm trying to tell you guys. I don't know if he's just afraid. I think he's afraid to criticize Israel. He does have this podcast on Spotify. He has a contract with them. I don't know if that's the thing, but we'll get there.
But just
I believe that. I believe that. I believe that maybe that should be, but I think the approach could be different.
Yeah.
Right?
Well,
or no?
I don't have any expertise in war.
Neither.
But I'm horrified that they can just shoot missiles into buildings. And they tell people to get out, but then they bomb the areas where they're going to. I mean, the whole thing's nuts, man. It's nuts, and it's so dangerous. It's so dangerous.
He said he's not an expert, right? You don't have to be an expert. I mean, no one's an expert on everything, right? But you don't really have to be an expert. Now I'm going to show you 2 clips here. The first one, you don't have to be an expert when you've had an expert on your show talk to you about this for 3 hours. And Abby Martin has been on Joe Rogan's show multiple times talking about this issue. Abby Martin's views on Israel. Listen to this. Again, this is before October 7th. This was 4 years ago. 4 years ago. Listen to this.
Sick. I mean, you texted me that video of the kid, another medic was just shot. So
yeah, there was something
crazy.
that Bilal Muhammad, who's one of the UFC fighters, had on his Instagram. And I texted you that. It's so, again, this is another thing.
Right.
It's so difficult to understand what's actually going on. There's so many pro-Israel people that put their head in the sand and don't want to look at some of these atrocities and don't want to look at some of the videos that you sent me of soldiers shooting at people that are not doing anything.
That part right there. So there's Joe Rogan saying that Abby Martin had sent him videos of soldiers shooting at people who were not doing anything. Again, this was 4 years ago. So Joe Rogan knew exactly what was happening to the Palestinian people. Gaza and Israel wasn't at war then. There's more.
Right. Their whole argument is that it's all Hamas and their human shields. I mean, we looked through hundreds of hours of footage that these people gave us, and it's mind-blowing footage. It looks absolutely cinematic and epic, but the footage is harrowing, and I didn't see one weapon. I didn't see one militant, not one weapon. It was literally people with slingshots throwing rocks at tanks. It's kind of a rite of passage. It's very symbolic. They're not trying to hurt anyone. No Israeli soldiers have been hurt or killed, during 2018, which is what the film looks at, is through 2018 of the Great March of Return. And there's not any weapons. There's no militants. Hamas has nothing to do with the march. And
you hear this? So when Joe Rogan said in that other clip, he's like, but the Israelis say they have to do it. They got to get rid of Hamas. And here's Abby Martin on his show explaining to him in reference to the March of Return that part in all things had nothing to do with Hamas, but they were still killing the Palestinian people. So Joe Rogan knows, even if there are some Israelis that are making that statement, Joe Rogan knows the truth, though.
And it's just shocking. I mean, it's shocking how many war crimes were committed on camera. And it's just amazing the propaganda that's just told to us about what this is and why they have the right to kill people that pose no threat to them.
When you were on last time and you talked about this, one of my email accounts was flooded with literally a chain letter, like the same letter, like denouncing you and your lies and your anti-Semitic perspective and your.
So you hear what he's saying? He said, when you were on my show last time and we talked about this. So like I told you, she has been on his show and discussed this with him multiple times. So I'm not saying Joe Rogan has to be an expert on this issue. He hasn't been an expert on a lot of issues, but that didn't stop him from voicing his opinion and standing for something in reference to it.
Anti-Israelis perspective. It was weird because it was the same email.
AstroTurf, yeah, it was fake.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, that's a campaign. You
But
know
it
that
came
that has a
from
lot
hundreds.
of money behind it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of money behind that. I mean,
here's Abby Martin even talking about the money that's behind these things. You see this?
The film is mind-blowing. Go to GazaFightsForFreedom.com if you want to check it out when it gets released, and it's just really incontrovertible, Joe. I mean, even if it were a war between armies, all of these things that Israel has done are still documented war crimes and very grievous violations of international law. And we're talking about direct targeting and assassinations by Israeli snipers of disabled people, of children,
Medics.
press, and medics.
So here's Abby Martin telling Joe Rogan again 4 years ago about Israel war crimes. There was no October 7th at that point. It wasn't Hamas killed all these people at this festival, right?
And that's who Razan was. She was a medic, and as you mentioned, another medic just passed away, was killed, rather. I hate to use the passive voice because you always hear Palestinians died. No, they were murdered. They're all being murdered by snipers, and they pose no threat to them. And so the film looks at this UN investigation basically during the march in 2018 and documents all of the grievous crimes and atrocities conducted by the Israeli military. And I mean, you know, Palestine has a right to defend itself. And this isn't even what that is. But if you look at the UN Charter of 1978, they say that, you know, occupied peoples and besieged peoples have the right actually for armed self-defense. And the fact that this is not even what that is, that there's literally people going out there in peace with their bared chests, holding flags, and they're getting killed and sniped. There's so many amputations. I mean, just in 2018 alone, there was 35 kids who were killed.
You see this? You hear all this? Joy, that is a really good point. Joe ain't an expert about the jab, but he had no problems talking about that. Oh, Joy, you are so right. You are so right. Okay. So you see that, right? All right. Let me show you another one. Because like I said, she's been on there multiple times. Here's another clip when Abby Martin was on Joe Rogan's show. This was 5 years ago. It's called What Does Israel Want?
What does Israel want? Like, as a state, like, what do they want from the Palestinians? What do they expect? They expect to just keep the status quo, keep business going as usual, never let those people live a normal life. Like, what do they want? And why do they have so much hate? And why haven't the Israeli people, like, seen the horrors of this and rebelled?
Why do they have so much hate? So this is Joe Rogan acknowledging that he knew the Israeli government hated the Palestinian people. Ooh, buddy.
Well, to be a leftist in Israel, it's difficult, and to be an anti-Zionist, it's even more difficult because you're rejecting your entire identity,
your religion as well as your
everything.
political identity.
But look, it's a settler colonial state, just like a lot of other things in the past. But this is different because it's ongoing, and ever since the inception of Israel to today, the colonizers who colonized that land always knew that there was an indigenous Arab population that they wanted to kill or expel. And
that part right there. Abby Martin explaining to Joe Rogan that even when they first colonized, they knew there was a Palestinian population that they wanted to expel. So Joe Rogan knows this is not just about what happened on October 7th. He's been told about this multiple times. He said he texted her and sent her videos. So if Joe Rogan was sending her videos and stuff like this, he was seeing these things himself as well. So he's very well aware.
that's still the goal, like from Ben Gurion himself, the original, prime minister of Israel. I mean, he said there's so many Arabs here, we need to expel them and take their places. So it was never a land without a people and a people without a land. It was always overrun with Arabs, and they've always just wanted to expel the indigenous population so they can have an ethno-supremacist state. And that's really what it is. And that's
so. Can you be? I'm sorry to interrupt you, but can you be a Muslim and live in Israel? Can you be a Muslim and live in Jerusalem?
Yeah, but there's so many discriminatory laws that basically it's an apartheid state for non-Jews.
Like in what way? Like what are the laws that?
Here's Abby Martin telling Joe Rogan that it's an apartheid state.
I mean, there's so many things that people can check out, but I would really recommend the work of MIKO, PELED, and Ronnie Barkin. They're two anti-Zionist Israeli-born Jews who have extensively talked about this. But I mean, just in the roads, like there's settler-only roads compared to Palestinian.
Settler only.
Yeah, compared to Palestinian roads, people have different license plates. You have different ID cards.
So if you are a person
segregated schools, like just all that stuff.
So you can't go to a regular school?
No, you can, but it's so segregated and hostile, and you're so indoctrinated from an early age to basically hate these people and think of them as the other. And I encourage everyone to check out interviews that I did with just average Israelis in the streets, because the genocidal rhetoric is very apparent and it's very open. And these people were talking.
You hear all this? You guys hear all this? She was telling him back then about the genocidal rhetoric. Way before October 7th, 5 years ago.
Can you play right now?
Sure. Yeah, check out Abby Martin, Israelis, candid interview with Israelis.
Did you have one opinion of that situation before you went there and then a different one after you came back?
Well, I didn't even know what Palestine was until I was 18 years old. So when people say, oh, you're only telling us one side of the story, look, I didn't know the Palestine side of the story until I was an adult, which really should say something about our education system and our media when you completely obfuscate an entire reality and are only told one side.
And I agree with that as well. It's the same thing for me. Growing up, I was told the Israeli side of the story. I was not told about the Palestinian side of the story. And she mentions the education system and the media. It's all captured. It's all captured. Who's writing these history books? Are Zionists writing the history textbooks? Who is in charge of the narrative in reference to mainstream media? Are Zionists behind that? I mean, AIPAC has his hands in Congress, but it's not just AIPAC. There are other organizations too that are Zionist organizations that control the narrative.
But before I went there, I had a conception of what it was. But once you go, you really see how much worse it is.
It says Israeli party approves annexation plan. Oh, sorry, I lost it.
Is this the? So go to
coerce Palestinian departure.
So you can see even Joe Rogan is seeing this. Israeli party approves annexation plan to coerce Palestinian departure. Let me to speed up just a little bit. There we go. This is when Abby Martin was there and she was on the street.
After this, keep going.
Interviewing people on the street, I should say, not like us on the street.
Keep going.
And what are you asking?
Okay, this is good too.
Okay.
So yeah, start playing here. this is the thing. And also the Stand With Us people in the Israeli lobby basically said, oh, you cherry picked these interviews. You only picked like genocidal people to talk to. What the hell are you talking about? I was in Jerusalem. There's a place called Tolerance Square. There's a bustling shopping area. I spoke to people from all backgrounds, all walks of life. And I just asked them very simple questions. What is it like to live here? How do you deal with the, problems? And basically they just were very, very readily like comfortable to tell me very crazy genocidal things on camera, like thinking that would actually look good for an American audience. So keep that in mind and check this out. A lot of people are sympathizing with the Palestinian plight. Can you talk about what it's like to kind of live in this situation?
First of all, it's very hard. I'm in an organization. It's called Lahava. It's against the Jews shouldn't marry Arabs.
Did you say the organization did what again?
The organization is, the thing of it is that Jews shouldn't marry Arabs.
Shouldn't marry Arabs. Yeah. Why do you feel strongly about that?
Because Jews is a special nation that God gave it to the Jews, and we don't want Jews to get mixed up together with a different nation.
I think.
So you hearing all this? Abby Martin has documentary. Like, you hearing all this?
Israelis have to take over, and they have to kick them away. It will be much better not to kill them, just to go back to Arab countries.
As if they didn't live there.
Go back to Arab countries. When there were already Palestinians living in Palestine, but he wants them to leave. And there are several people. I don't know if you guys have seen this documentary that Abby Martin has done before, but she talks to a lot of people. And so Joe Rogan even heard that back then. They don't want the people there. Joe knows this.
These people, there's no need to try, there's no need to talk to them. What we can do is when they do enough harm, we retaliate. That's war, and that's the situation that any Jew who lives in Israel has to deal with.
Okay.
The Arabs made their name and memory be obliterated.
It's about to get really crazy.
We have to kill terrorists. They'd be afraid to cause us any more trouble, and all will be fine. They'll be in their villages, and we'll be here. We don't have to live together, and everything will be just fine.
You see? And that's him reading it. Now, you can see the rest of this if you want to see the full video. It's called Joe Rogan, What Does Israel Want? And that one is from 5 years ago, where Abby Martin explains to him the Israel-Palestine conflict. And all I have to say is this. So I don't know, who got to Joe. I don't know why in that discussion with Bobby Lee, he's pretending like he don't really know. And he's saying it's a complicated situation. She's been on his show multiple times, obviously going into great detail about these discussions. He said on the video that he's texted her videos about some of the things that he saw, yada, yada. He is very well aware. Very well aware. When I say we need more independent media and we need to educate the people, a lot of us supported the fact that, Joe Rogan should not be censored when they were threatening to remove him, or people were asking Spotify to remove him from the platform and stuff like that. A lot of us supported Joe Rogan, was like, no, like that's censorship, yada, yada. But my thing is, at the end of the day, Joe's still establishment. If you can't sit up here and criticize the state of Israel today, you still establishment. Let's go to some of the comments here. Thank you for the super chat, B1. Someone please ask Charlie Kirk about it. The Tuskegee Airmen and their record compared to the white pilots. Frank says, didn't Joe Rogan have Norm Finkelstein on his show recently? I could swear he did. Let me check. Let me check for that, Frank. Lorez says, Sabby, the establishment has got to Rogan. He knows he can't go full against Israel or they'll get him. So this is his both sidesing the issue. Thank you, Sparky. Robbie isn't anywhere near BRIE's league. Thank you. Kiwi says, Joe Rogan has his brain memory totally removed. I doubt it. Joe is covering for somebody. Interesting. Thank you, Laugh. Joe is okay on UFOs and fake fighting. Joe is establishment. Yeah. And thank you for this, Sparky. You don't have to be a weatherman to know which way the wind blows. Thank you for that. Let me see. You said he... Let's see if he... Did he interview Norm? I don't know. I haven't seen an interview with him and Norm Finkelstein. Maybe you're thinking someone else, or maybe it's not on YouTube. Maybe it was just on like Spotify. That could be the case as well. And Norm's been on a lot of people's shows. Wait a minute. Jewish political scientist Dr. Norm Finkelstein exposing lies of Zionists. Tim Kennedy. Wait, was he on here? Let me see. There's Norm. Okay, no. I was trying to see if they were on the same thing together. Okay, so I don't know. Maybe not. Would be good for Norm to go on there, though. Like, if it would be good for him to invite Norm on, though. Okay. That is pretty much. I know I said I was going to start the Colorado initiatives. It's late. Sabby had a long day, so I'm going to have to start that Tuesday evening. I will not be live this Sunday. This is my Sunday off, so I'm every other Sunday. And there's some football happening this weekend, right? Right? All right. Yeah, we'll pick up ballot measures on Tuesday evening. We're going to start with Colorado for 2023. We'll go over the Colorado results. And then once I'm done, there's only 9 states for this one for 2023. Once I'm done with the ballot measures for 2023, we're going to jump into the ballot measures for 2024. So you'll know what's going to be on the ballot in November. As I told you before, even if you don't want to vote for the president, still go and vote for those ballot measures because those are important. It does matter. It's made a lot of difference in my state. All right, guys, I am heading out of here. Have a good weekend. I appreciate you folks. Oh, you got Rockfin? Okay, come on. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, JVB. Thank you. Thanks so much. Heading out of here, guys. Have a good weekend. Have a good night. Keep up the fight.